Hello, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about the Dutch Warmblood. We're also going to be talking about the Belgian as well as the Selle Francais, because in my opinion, I genuinely can't tell the difference between the three of them, and each of them have their own problems. I am joined here today by Drew Swifthunter, a good friend of mine, who knows a little more about these guys than I do. So she is going to be our better horseman of the two of us. So, Drew, would you like to start us off by talking about the most problematic gait for the Belgian or for the Dutch today? If you want to start us off talking about vertical and what that means, um, we could get right into why some of these gaits are problematic. Obviously, the walk, I believe, is fine unless you see something wrong with it.
Well, discussing the vertical angle of the head, the only reason why I would say that is problematic is because even though you can see on the horse, the nose is, looking like it's on a straight line and it looks fine and collected, but actually that is not the case. That horse is actually being pulled behind the vertical, and you can actually tell because of the angle of the head. If the head were to be lowered or the neck straightened, obviously the nose would be tilted, the chin would be very close to the neck, and the angle, and if we kept the angle the same, obviously it would be behind the vertical. So even though the horse's nose looks like, in the animation right now, looks like it's on the vertical, or even if you stand still, looks like it's in front of the vertical, that is not the case. And that is, in a way, teaching riders that that sort of angle of the head is good for the horse when it's really not. And it will provide a lot of more neck pains and tensing and pain later on for your horse.
Would you say that the Belgian also suffers from that? Because watching your horse as you've been moving, would you say that it's also behind the vertical or that it just holds its head weird?
Definitely on the canter. As you can see, even just the slight difference in the trot and the walk when you turn into a canter. I'll show you, I'll just straight line right here.
I'll move with you. You're good.
So you're walking, at first it might seem okay, and then when you go to the canter, the head immediately gets pulled in and it has a really tight, intense movement on the head, and that is not good for it as well. Definitely being pulled behind the vertical, and it just kind of makes the whole neck and head look very tense while the rest of the body is just kind of flinging itself around. You're not collected at all.
Yeah.
Even if the face is pulled in, that doesn't mean collection.
This is true. All right, let's get into the trot, not the extended, but the typical trot now, and then we'll get into the extended trot after. To me, from working with walking horses my entire life and being in an environment with gaited horses, I don't know as much about trots as I do um, these types of horses. However, I do know that you want the opposite legs, being front left and back right, to be even at all times. You should be able to draw a straight line from each of the legs to be parallel whenever they are in motion. The Dutch Warmblood is not even at all. This horse, if you draw a line here and you draw a line here, um, these legs are not moving in tandem. Neither are these two legs here. This horse is severely off balanced. And what they say about a horse that trots and doesn't have that even leg movement with one another, they're being forced into it. They're off balance. There's going to be leg issues later in life. It's not balanced, and it hurts the animal. It truly does. So, from what I know, this is not a trot that you want to see. It looks really fake to me as well. Um, in walking horses, there's also, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, this practice called soaring. And when you soar a horse, you are applying a lot of pain to the feet to make the horse pick up its feet higher. And a sign that a horse has been soared is that there is hang time in the front feet, meaning the horse will hold its foot off of the ground a little bit longer. And the reason they do that is because it is painful for their feet to hit the ground. And it looks like, of course, this horse wasn't soared. You don't soar non-gaited horses, but this horse has a little bit of hang time in the trot. And whenever I see any form of hang time at all, I automatically think of an abusive practice, an abusive training, that there's some form of pain involved. So even just from that, this standard trot, it just screams that this horse doesn't want to be here and that it's in pain.
It's a modern dressage technique of having the horse's front legs be a lot more showy than the back legs, because the back legs aren't as engaged, because they're not focusing on the collection of the hind end, and because they just want the height and the extension of the front, which means they are going more downhill, and all they care about is what the front legs are doing, and it doesn't matter whether or not the back legs are matching as well.
Now, the Belgian, I'm watching it as we're moving. Is there anything you'd like to say about that one's trot? Because I've noticed it doesn't seem as bad as the Dutch, not nearly, but it looks like they are breaking their fetlocks when they land in the front. If that's something that you're noticing as well, or if that's a normal bounce, what do you think about that?
Some horses are more flexible than others. I can't tell if the horse that they used to model this one was more flexible, and just because a horse is flexible doesn't mean it's a healthy flexible. It could just be from the breeding and the genes that horse has received. As far as the gait goes, it's not necessarily a really obnoxious trot. I would say it's a little bit more relaxed,
Yeah.
but the head is not bad either, but it's definitely not as bad as some of the other horses on this game.
Of course. All right. Then if we want to talk about the extended trot, you did some extensive research about this, so I will definitely let you take the lead on this one.
Well, I'm basically just going to give you a summary on that. So, basically, as you are trotting, you can see that the toes flick.
Yes.
The front toes, they flick upwards. And that is not actually a meaningful action. They don't actually mean to do that. And basically what's happening is that the back end and their butt and their legs is tight. Because their face is being pulled in, they hollow out, and so their back end gets tight. And what happens is, because the horse doesn't want to trip and like fall forward, and it doesn't want to fall down, it flicks its legs out like that to catch itself. It's not a meaningful movement. It's not reaching. It's basically just shoving its legs out because its back legs are tense.
In addition to what you are saying, I will definitely leave a link to a video by the name of Rattle. Most people who watch my channel have probably heard of Rattle before. She does an entire, very extensive video about this horse and why there's so much abuse that is highlighted in this animal. And she definitely talks about that particular point more in depth. But essentially, the straight and narrow is that this is not a good practice, and it is teaching kids that abuse is okay. It's teaching people that you can see this kind of movement and that it's all right to do, even though this is very much an abusive practice that I believe should not be performed.
And do you see how the back legs seem to be like catching up with the front legs? Like they're not totally moving in sync.
Yeah, that's
It
true
almost
too.
seems like because the back legs are literally not engaged and it's just going forward. An actual true and classical dressage movement or trot, it doesn't matter how extended the legs are, they're moving at the same tempo and the same rhythm as well.
Do you have any complaints about the canter other than the fact that it looks like it's being pulled in very tight?
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same with all the other gaits, with the front legs being a little bit more exuberant and extended than the back. But it just highlights the back legs looking kind of lame. Like, it's not it's not an actual collected canter to me, because the back is hollowed and because the back legs aren't reaching at all. It just kind of looks a little gimpy to me.
Something that I'm also noticing now that I'm performing this animation, it really looks like there's a heavy impact on the elbows and like the shoulder region, like the chest region on this animal when it moves. I mean, I'm sure there is a heavy impact, but it doesn't look like a normal impact. It looks kind of like it looks like it's kind of throwing its feet down, you know? I don't know if you can see it. It looks like it's there because it has to be, not because it wants to be. Yeah, so let's do the extended canter, not the slow gallop. I absolutely hate that this animation is called a gallop. No trainer is ever going to say, "Okay, kids, let's gallop." In my opinion, I think that the canter, the extended canter or whatever, to me it looks fine. I mean, it is the prettiest animation out of all of them in my opinion, but the collection is quite bad, and it's throwing that inside leg, which is the front left. It's throwing that leg out really weird, and it's not doing the same for the other leg. I don't know if you can see that. The leading leg there is very
Yeah.
exaggerated.
It's just a with classical dressage, they like having the pretty front leg movements because that's all that really matters to them anymore. Not that the horse is actually collected, but just how high it throws its legs up.
Hmm.
So that's kind of what they're doing here.
And then the gallop, I don't think anyone really cares. It's just a gallop. I don't really see anything wrong with this gallop. It's just, you know, I mean,
If anything, that's the only animation where the
the
head's
head
in
is
front of the
good.
vertical.
The only animation that's
Finally,
not
we got
abusive. Oh my goodness. This, what is this called?
it's a piaffe, I think.
Okay. From what I've seen,
I think
that I've just seen that this has been performed very poorly. I know that the horse they modeled this off of was done very badly. I mean, I don't know that much about this or what to say about it other than the rest of the horse has been very poorly done. Um, one can say that this might be as well.
the legs are actually supposed to be moving at the same time. You see how the back legs just kind of are just slightly too late when it comes to lifting up as
Oh
far as
yeah.
the front legs go. Those
Yeah.
are supposed to be together, and it's supposed to be a movement that looks smooth and natural. There's not supposed to be that like really large bounce to it. Yeah, and this is me basing all of my knowledge on like the difference between classical dressage and modern dressage.
Yeah.
So,
Would you like to very quickly explain the difference between modern and classic dressage for those who might not understand?
I'll really do just give a little simple version. Classical dressage was made for like horses to be able to move in any direction and be completely at ease and one with their rider. It was supposed to be used for military horses to be able to do maneuvers and be uh like toe to toe with other horses in a line, and they're able to move in sync with each other.
It's for the
So it was
uniformity.
basically that's
Yeah.
how it was built. Yes.
Hmm.
Um modern dressage was built because it sounds kind of silly when I put it this way, but people stopped caring much about classical dressage because they thought, oh, well, I can make my horse do these fun and cool things. And look at all these competitions. Look, that horse is throwing its legs up. So it's literally because of it looks pretty. That's what modern dressage is based off of. And so then classical dressage didn't become as popular as modern because it didn't look as flashy and beautiful. So, which is why modern dressage is it's mainstream when it comes to dressage now.
Yeah, and I've noticed that a lot of the rules in the rule book that were protecting these horses from abuse have now been removed, and which is not only
Yep.
allowing but also encouraging abuse towards these horses. And it's just shameful to see that all of these practices are now being not only shown but also highlighted in Star Stable. And the argument is it's a virtual game. These horses aren't actually feeling any pain, but the problem is that a lot of kids learn from this game. I can't tell you how many times I've seen someone be like, "Oh, I didn't know this about horses until Star Stable," and I say this in every single one of my reviews. You want to highlight the traits that make horses unique. However, in highlighting those traits, you don't want to highlight the ones that are abusive or malpractice or things that will hurt the animal. So, although Star Stable did highlight the unique traits in a way, we'll get to that in a second, it highlighted the wrong ones. Um, I find it kind of shameful, and this horse I think should be redone. It's not the only horse that has abusive actions in it. The Lipizan is a good example. I didn't even touch on that in my last video because I didn't research that part enough because I don't know much about dressage, admittedly. Um, but in terms of the uniqueness, Where they didn't highlight unique features is the fact that it is a Warmblood and there are 3 of them in the game, and honestly, they all look completely identical to me. This is a Belgian here, this is a Dutch here. Aside from a few minute differences, if I saw these 2 in the distance, I honestly couldn't tell them apart. Um, the same goes for the Selle Francais, which we will also be looking at. Um, I don't see the differences. I genuinely don't. I think that these horses are kind of shallow and put in here for uh, show jumpers and people who do dressage just to, meet that quota and to make a dollar. Um, with that in mind, we're now going to look at the Belgian. We're going to look at how they were made, their animations, and a few things about them that highlight yet again malpractice and things that should not be displayed in a horse game. Drew, what was your first point with the Belgian?
I mean, just looking at it now, the horse looks kind of skinny. It's like there's not really any muscle on it. And I would say a big difference between the Dutch and the Belgian is that its movements are a lot more like it's tossing himself around. Like there's not much balance to this horse. Um, you say, well, he has a better standing in our idle animations, except when he just tosses his head and like tries to avoid the bit. That's something that I don't like to see on my horses. Just seeing them trying to mess with the bit in their mouth. Also, while we're standing here, there's also a very prominent hunter's bump. And I only bring that up because hunter's bumps are caused by damages in the hip. And that could be from being hollow all the time. Even just standing here, just the way there's no sort of muscle back there. And it's not really holding himself very nicely, in my opinion. And so hunter's bumps are caused by damage in the hip, and that bump is basically a buildup of tissue right there on the joint on top to prevent from getting even more damaged. And so I'm not saying that right now my horse is broken, but it's like that's not something you want to encourage seeing. Like that's not something you should normalize. Like from bad riding, my horse has to build tissue on its back to keep itself from being damaged anymore. You know what I mean?
Like when you do, you're right. When you do compare it to the Dutch, oh my God, me messing this up again. It almost looks like you can see his skeletal structure just because of how little there is there. That's crazy.
That's just not something I think a horse game should normalize. Like you shouldn't
Absolutely.
want your horse to look like that.
In terms of animation, is there any particular animation on them that you view as rather abusive or incorrect or anything like that?
Walk's fine, trot's fine. I think we kind of touched up on this a tiny bit in the beginning, but just the canter, um, it's really the horse goes super hollow, and the head just gets pulled in very tightly, and so its legs are just kind of throwing itself out there, and at least it has more reach than I would say the Dutch does. Like you can kind of see the legs are kind of moving or like at the same rhythm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not kind of weakened in the back, but it's very hollow, and the head I never really liked the head, and I know why now is because the horse is literally being pulled behind the vertical. Again, if we were to change the angle of the neck, you could totally see it.
Yeah.
But it's just really tight and pulled in, and just look at the difference when I do I guess normal gallop. How the head reaches forward. Like that's something you should want to or you should see on even just a normal canter. Like I don't know why they have it so different between this and then just being tight and pulled in like that. It's not the head being pulled in doesn't affect the butt. No matter how many people like to think it does, it doesn't. Because your horse needs to build muscle on the butt to be able to become collected and use its butt muscles, not I'm going to work out the head muscles and pull them in tight so that the butt can be strong,
Yeah.
which doesn't make any sense. But then with the normal gallop, I mean, it's the head tilted up is fine. It's a normal like horse form when it comes to just running by itself. You see horses running like that all the time. The one thing I can complain is just it really hollows out the back. Like if somebody was used to walking around with slumped shoulders, like if that's what they're used to, then that's what their default. And I would rather train my horse to use its back muscles so that when it goes out for a run with its buddies in the field, doesn't hollow out, and its go-to isn't just to hollow out and run around like this. You know what I mean?
Up. That's also a problem because, like with horses, the way horses move is the butt is where all your power comes from. That is where, when they are running, that is the driving force to move forward. The front legs are there for stability and to bounce up off the ground again to keep moving. Like the front legs are not there to pull. They don't pull. The back pushes, the front stabilizes. So for these horses to be basically relying completely on their front end to move and not engaging those rear muscles is a terrible practice, especially like for the owners to teach them to do that and to collect them so much where they can't engage their rear because you are crippling the animal very, slowly and over time. However, that definitely will add up.
Well, I want to say real quick that
Oh
there's
yeah.
nothing wrong with these horses having these traits as long as you work to try to get these habits out of them, to try to build those back muscles and to try to engage that butt when you go and do dressage. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But what's wrong about what Star Stable's doing is that they're like you can't build the muscles on these horses. This is it.
Exactly.
This is what you're getting. And that's what's sad is that they're almost making it seem like this is a Belgian Warmblood. This is what you get, and this is what you want to have. Like this is the figurehead of a Belgian Warmblood. It's like, no, that's not what you should want in a horse. This is not your end goal.
Definitely sets a very bad example, and especially for kids who use this game as a reference point. Like, obviously, we say, oh, not everybody does. Well, you shouldn't. That doesn't matter. Like, certain kids still will. And they'll go on and they'll abuse their horse because Star Stable did it. I saw it in a game, therefore it must be true. It's very hard to change people's opinions. Okay, so my main point about these two horses, they are a different breed. If you had told me that, I would not believe you. Besides idle animations, even looking at the legs, looking at the rear, looking at the face, the shoulders, especially in the chest region, I genuinely cannot tell you the difference between these two animals. That's really my main point is that all the warm bloods are completely identical. So if you want to know what warm blood to choose, get the Belgian, I guess, because it's the cheapest.
Um, kind of has the same problem with the Dutch Warmblood, how it just kind of stands there with its head really pulled in
Mhm.
and tense. I think it's supposed to be for some sort of like collected look, but it just with the angle, it's not actually on the vertical, it's behind and then it's just noticeable. It's a really icky look to me. Just
Yeah.
the head being pulled in that far, like not any sort of natural ness to it. When it comes to the walk, the head's tense. It doesn't really have the same fluidity in the walk as the Belgian Warmblood, I'd say.
Mhm.
Like it's almost like it's stepping heavily.
Yeah, I can see what you mean here.
It's hard to it's hard to tell. But besides that, I mean, it's not like too noteworthy, I guess.
Mhm.
The trot, it's bouncy, but I mean, it's again, it's just a trot.
Yeah.
At least it's not as at least the legs kind of are matching when it
Yeah, they
comes
are.
to rhythm and such. Um, Canter, I would say the head tilts up slightly. The back legs are not as exuberant as the front, but it's not as noticeable. You have to really be paying attention and looking for it to be able to see it.
Yeah.
Um, it really hollows out in the back though. It's kind of weird how high the front legs go, but I guess it's not an impossible movement.
It looks like
But
their
it almost
knees
seems
bend in
it's
a weird way.
yeah, it almost looks like we're running uphill constantly. Like the way
Yeah.
it's not abusive or bad or anything. It just really looks odd. These aren't bad. I like the head reaching forward.
Mhm.
You can't tell very much that the back is hollowed out because again, it's jumping over something. I think it was a nice addition that they added to the game, especially when it comes to little jumps. Unfortunately, our horses just launch themselves up into outer space every time they jump, but
Yeah.
like the variety is nice, but I kind of wish it wasn't a gate. I wish it was like a little jump that you could do. You know what I mean?
But the way that the player moves on their back, they don't move exactly in the way with the horse. So there are these like not every single jump. It looks like every third or whatever. The person is like yanking back on the reins, which realistically, if you did that, would like tear the horse's mouth. It's just pulling way too hard. So when they animated the rider and the horse, it doesn't really seem like they have the two of them in time with each other. Maybe that's dependent on the level of the horse and the speed of the animal. Maybe it lines up better with like a happier or sadder or a lower level or a higher level, who knows? But just from what I see here, it doesn't look like they animate the person and the horse together. It looks like two independent teams did it and were given a general idea and told to run with it. But yeah, so this has been a review on specifically the Dutch, but just in general, all of the warm bloods. Thank you for coming on and helping me out with this. You truly helped out more than you could ever imagine. I appreciate you, as always. All right, and that'll be
Thanks
it.
for having me on here.
Absolutely. I love how I was like, oh wow, no one ever comes to this arena. It'll be a nice spot to film because we won't get interrupted. And then that one person on the Gen 1 Arabian came through.
Just there for some reason.
Like, why are you here? She fell down from the mountain like a character in a fairy tale. What was that?
Just dropped by.
Literally.
Okay.